hit yes, and I'll show you how to do that right now. Start with an in-memory zeroed partition table. Yes, I want to do that, and I hit enter. For the label type, let us use the standard, which is DOS. Hit enter, and right over here we have our partitioner. Alright, so this is extremely simple to partition, especially with BlackArch, because there is a sort of like a graphical experience to it. So we have free space. You can see that we have the device, the boot, whether or not it is the bootable partition. You have the amount of sectors and the size, and of course in this partition manager you have your the abbreviation G is for gigabyte and M is for megabyte, as you'll see in a second, and the ID type, right? So we want to hit new, so I'm going to hit enter, and it's going to ask us for the partition size. So the first partition we want to create is our boot partition. This is where the grub bootloader is going to be stored. I like giving this about 1 gigabyte or 500 megabytes because that's exclusively going to be used by the grub bootloader. So there we are. We have 500 megabytes, and you can see maybe followed by M for megabytes, G for gigabytes, or T for terabytes, right? So you can also configure sectors if you want. I'm going to specify 500 megabytes, and this is going to be a primary partition. I'm going to hit enter. So the partition type is fine. Linux is fine. That means it's going to use the latest one, which is XT4. That is the latest format. We want to make this device bootable, which is important. So we want to navigate using the arrow keys onto bootable and hit enter, and something interesting happens. You can see that we get this little asterisk here, which tells us that SDA1, which is our boot drive or our boot partition, is now bootable, and that's important because that's where grub is going to be stored, right? So now we need to go into the free space, and you can do that by navigating using the down arrow key, and we want to hit new. We now want to create our swap partition. I know a lot of people are against swap nowadays, and they say it's not really useful, but hey, I'm showing you how to configure it the right way. So I'm going to keep that to 1 gigabyte because the total RAM I have anyway is 2 gigabytes. So that makes mathematical sense. So I'm going to hit enter, and that is going to be a primary partition. However, for the type, we want to specify that this is a swap partition. So I'm going to hit type, and swap is usually under option 82. So you can specify the various types of partitions right over here. They may not even be supported, but they're available for you. So you have NTFS, you have Linux extended, and you have things like XT4, you have things like FAT32, FAT16, really old format types, but again, we're using Linux swap now, so I'm going to hit enter, and that should not be bootable, that's simply swap. So for that, I think that's perfectly fine. We want to go down into the free space, and this is going to be where we'll store all our files. So we want this to use all of the remaining space. So I'm going to hit new. The partition size, we'll leave it to its maximum configuration, which is 78.6 gigabytes, and I'm going to hit enter. It's a primary partition, and we are pretty much done now. All right, so we want to, since we're actually done now, we can sort of play around with any of the partitions you wanted you wanted to write. If you wanted to create any other ones, you can go ahead and do that right now. I'm pretty much good to go. So we want to write the partition table to the disk so that we have set the partition settings and what we have as the what we have as the boot partition, what we have as the actual swap partition, and the other partition that we created where our files are going to be stored. So I'm going to hit write, and it's going to ask us if we are sure we want to write the partition table to the disk. I'm going to hit yes and hit enter, and it's going to tell you that the partition table has been altered, and we can now hit quit. And now it's going to ask ask us right now over here if we want to encrypt the root partition, which is where our files are going to be stored. I'm not going to do that because I really am not going to be storing anything important, but it's great that it does give you that option. I'm going to hit no, and there we are. So there we are. Now it's going to ask us to specify what partitions are what. All right, so it's going to say, hey, can you specify what your boot partition is? Remember, we created the boot partition first, so that is going to be dev SDA1. So we're going to specify it. Make sure to specify the relative path. That's very important. So SDA1. It's now going to ask you for the boot file, the file system type, which is going to be XT4. It's using the latest version. It's now going to ask you for your root partition. That is the partition we'd created for all our files. So that is going to be dev SDA3. So dev SDA3, dev SDA3, hit enter. That is also XT4. I'm going to hit enter. It's now going to ask you for to specify your swap partition. So we created that we created our swap partition second. So that is going to be SDA2. That was about 1 gigabyte. So dev SDA2, and I'm going to hit enter. And it's going to ask you to confirm whether this is correct. And I'm going to hit yes, that is correct. And it's going to start formatting the partition. So it's going to say, are you sure you want to go ahead with the partitioning and formatting? So if you have any data on this disk, you might want to get rid of it. However, I'm guessing you don't. So I'm just going to hit yes, hit enter, and it's going to begin formatting the drives. So we'll wait for this to complete formatting. And it's going to begin the installation process. So it's going to start dumping all the data from the live ISO. So again, grab a coffee and pop some shells. So it's going to fetch the total size to transfer. So you want to give this a few seconds and immediately it'll start the installation process, right? So right now it's calculating the amount of data that is required and it's essentially dumping all the data from the live ISO. The install is about 40 gigabytes, I believe, and it will require more than 40 gigabytes for the installation. So you want to keep that in consideration when specifying your disk. Again, that's very, very important, right? So let me just wait for this to start up, or for the installer to start up. Alright, so the installer has started, and as you can see, it started the installation process. So it's going to take a while. Now, I do mean this, that it's going to install an actual 40 gigabytes, so you want to give it its time. It usually takes me about 30 minutes to install BlackArch on my disk drive, which is an actual hard drive. I'm not installing this on an SSD, so that might influence the speed. But again, you can wait for that to complete the installation, and I'll get back to you when that's done. Alright, so the installation is now complete and it is asking us to set our root password. So let me do that right now. So that is set. It's going to ask me to retype the password, and the root password is set. It's now going to prompt me to enter or to select whether or not I want a normal user account. I will hit yes, I do. The username is going to be Alexis, and it's now going to ask me to specify the password for Alexis. I'm going to hit enter, and there we are. So the password has been set successfully. It's now going to install the grub bootloader, and of course there we are. It's done successfully without any issues. And yeah, there it is. And now it's going to ask us to specify our time zone. I'm just going to specify UTC. So I'm going to hit yes, like so. And what is your subzone? I'm going to specify, let's see, well, if we could just specify UTC over here. So I'm going to hit enter. It's going to now unmount the file systems. As you can see, it gives you these little funny messages like game over. So now it's syncing the disks. And there we are. The BlackArch Linux installation was successful, and it's going to take us back to our terminal. And in this case, we now want to reboot our system. So I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to wait for it to reboot. Alright, so it is rebooted, and as you can see, we now are in grub, and we are able to specify BlackArch Linux and the advanced options as well. So I'm going to hit BlackArch Linux right over here, and I'll wait for it to load up into the login screen. Alright, we are now back in the login screen, and everything is similar to when we had loaded it up. We had loaded up the live ISO. So again, we're going to log in with the root user, and remember we had set the password for our root user at the end of the installation. So I'm going to hit that, and we should be in. And of course, you can now check your disks to see how much space was consumed. So I'm going to open up a terminal here, and yet let us use fdiskl here to list all the partitions. So you can see we have the boot partition, we have the swap partition, and right over here we have our root partition that contains all our files. So that is pretty much how to install BlackArch Linux, and we have successfully done it. Now in the next video, we'll be taking a look at getting everything essential installed, all the utilities, desktop environments, and configuring it for full use now. Alright, so that's pretty much going to be it for this video. Let me know if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'll be seeing you in the next video. Peace. Hey guys, Hackersploit here, back again with another video, and welcome to the BlackArch series where I'll be taking you through installing BlackArch, configuring it and getting set up for pen testing, forensics or any other security research that you might be into. Many of you might have realized that I do have a BlackArch video out there, but that was quite a while ago and I really had a bad microphone. So I thought, why not revamp the entire series and sort of bring life to it, because BlackArch is a distro that I haven't covered on this channel and I really like it. So here it is, and let's get started. So for those of you who are unaware of what BlackArch is and what it's used for, here's a bit of an introduction. You can check out their website